All right, so this video is called The Danger of Scientific Theory, Complexes, and Experimentation. What is known as gang stalking is basically similar to many other things where it's multiple experiments at once. Arguably, the main experiment is basically like this. We all know that if somebody takes too much hits of acid or too many shrooms, there's a risk that they will never be sane again. And this obviously, was noticed by the government, and they've driven people insane that way. We saw with MK Ultra people committing suicide, and so for many, many years, since just after World War II with the Cold War, a lot of people don't connect MK Ultra with the Cold War. Once you do, everything falls in place. It's a done deal. Anyone who doesn't believe in gang stalking after that probably should lose the right to vote. They don't know history. They didn't do their research. They're not very aware. Pretty much the typical controlled opposition or controlled political group, type of coward or a group of people. So somewhere between, theoretically, according to, psychiatry and pharmacology, chemistry, theoretically, somewhere between completely sober and, we'll say 10 hits of acid or whatever, right? Somewhere between drug to insanity and completely sober is an approximate zone where one's belief systems can be altered, manipulated, and changed. This is all theory. But for those of you who don't understand it, look at psychiatry. Psychiatry is all theory. Psychology is all theory and perspectives and disagreements. Even psychiatry has different types of psychiatry. There's biological psychiatry. There's critical psychiatry, and so on and so forth. So when we look at this situation, it is impossible for somebody to be a part of this process as far as a perpetrator of it, and to be counted among the most insightful people on the planet by the careful observer. Because people who are extremely intelligent at the highest level simply live a righteous life. I'll give you an example. When you see somebody suffering, okay, it hits you. When someone else sees that same person suffering and they've suffered that way themselves, arguably it hits them harder. Why? Because they have more insight into the person's suffering. So logic and basic common sense will tell you that with insight and careful observation, observational skills, a higher, ability to deduce and ascertain, masterful critical thinking, comes the desire to do the right thing because you understand it better than other people do. How can one be the most insightful person, for example, and not feel compassion or empathy? It is impossible. Now, we will see a lot of satanic dogs and New World Order heathens trying to argue this, trying to say that I'm wrong. And I've gone over time and time again how all the most respected philosophers, Einstein, by society in general, Einstein, Pythagoras, Socrates, Jesus, and some people say Gandhi and so on. They all agree with me on this, And so it becomes extremely impossible to believe that anybody who would perpetrate this stuff could be the most insightful, no matter how you look at it. If you make the argument, well, they don't know the extent of the suffering that they're causing, well, then they're not insightful. No matter how you slice it. Either they know and they're not insightful enough to appreciate why not to do it, or they don't know the extent. Either way, they're not that insightful. It doesn't take me to figure this out here. Okay? So what you see is, it's just like rolling the dice. You roll it enough times, you'll get a 3. That's the idea of it. The idea is that they're going to gang stalk everybody. And almost everybody who's gang stalked is covertly drugged, whether they can tell or not. They have a lot going on in their mind, and a lot of times they don't understand why that is. And usually, 5, 7 years into it, when they increase the dosage, they notice. Okay? Now, those of you who drink and smoke, you're not doing yourselves any favors. You're less likely to notice. And I'll say again, it is impossible to thoroughly brainwash somebody without mind-altering substances. It's one thing to be raised a certain way by your family. It's one thing to be conditioned by your own choices and urges in adolescence and to have them, stay with you as you grow up. It's another for somebody else who you almost certainly have some awareness of, the fact that they are doing this for a reason that isn't good. That's why they're doing it, covertly, to condition you and change your mind and change your underlying belief system. All right? When you go to college, for example, there is a level of that, but it's not a complete brainwash, okay? It is, they give you, they're trying to push you certain ways, but they don't flat out tell you what to think. They don't say, you know what, you're going to read this paper and your argument is going to be this, okay? And then when you do it, you don't end up believing that. If they do that, if that is your assignment, they say, I want you to argue for, fucking eugenics, okay? You're not going to all of a sudden believe in eugenics just because they told you to make that argument. You see, that doesn't happen that way. It is impossible to do that without mind-altering substances. And it's all theoretical because all of our minds have similar structures, but they are unique. We have our unique genetic code. There is no universal scale that one can use for the human mind. There is no way to measure intelligence because all minds aren't exactly the same. They don't work exactly the same. So to say, well, I'm going to, test everybody by their ability to do math or something, that's not going to show you how, it's not going to show you how smart this person is. Because he might be good at fucking, I don't know, remembering things or something, biology, he might not be good at calculations. So when you look at this situation, these people are relying on illusion, just like with the Cold War. They were doing it to everybody, but they were zooming in on certain civic institutions and certain political groups and churches and certain groups of people and certain individuals. Okay? So everybody is being misled by the media, and that is a form of a psych op. It's a psychological operation because propaganda and controlled media have a certain psychological effect, and there's a desired psychological effect that they are trying to achieve. I mean, this is a no-brainer. Yes, there are psych ops. Yes, they will step it up on you for this precise reason. Okay, we are heading toward a world of mandatory yearly psychiatric evaluations. And there will be punishments if you don't do that. Okay? Some of them will be very obvious. Some of them will be a little bit more subtle. Your insurance might cover less if you haven't taken your regular psychiatric evaluations. You might not be able to, apply for government jobs if you don't have a history of regular psychiatric evaluations. There will be overt, open penalties, obvious penalties. There will be more subtle ones. The surveillance state mixed with yearly psychiatric evaluations in a pseudoscience, that is psychiatry, that allows for misdiagnosis at the whim of the psychiatrist. Okay, creates a situation where anybody who is not in a controlled group will be labeled mentally ill as a way to discredit them. So going back to my awareness pyramid, of course it is. You know, it is impossible to be the most insightful person in America and not to be labeled mentally ill. Because as a result of that insight, you are going to try to help people out. And you're not going to do it in a controlled group, because you're going to put together that's not helping anybody but a bunch of bad people who are killing 65 million plus people every year. So what's going to happen? The most insightful person must be either killed or labeled mentally ill. So whoever's still living, you know, you must know that the people who have damaged brains from drug use, the people who are annoying and misdiagnosed by psychiatry, and the small percentage of people who are born with biological dysfunction, they're born with abnormalities, and they're going to be grouped in with the political dissidents, okay? And the political dissidents are the most insightful people in America, in any given country, because every country's corrupt. So what happens then? And I'm not saying that everybody who's helping them is stupid. No. But what I am saying will not be taken kindly by them nevertheless. Because I am saying everyone who is helping them or is part of what they are doing is automatically excluded from the top of the pyramid of intellect, which completely takes away from the idea. It destroys the idea. When you truly realize that I'm right, it just destroys it. You'll never see it any other way again once you hear this video and truly comprehend it. Okay, it destroys the idea that the people in charge are the most intellectual and they should be allowed to subjugate us. That somebody who went to some, fancy schmancy school or something and was given a nice fancy schmancy position in society is some kind of superior intellectual being. No, a lot of these people are smart, yes, and they're talented at certain things, but are they the most insightful people? No. And what is the highest form of intellect is wisdom as a result of insight. You can't have wisdom without insight, right? So if you're not the most insightful person, you could not possibly be the most wise. So, and of course, wisdom is the highest form of intellect. When all is said and done, the wise man is king in the world of intellect and scholars. And what's sad is that sometimes he is so wise that smart people who have complexes, remember, I'm going to cover this, I only have 2 minutes left, they aren't going to give him his credit, or they're not going to understand why he's right. They're going to say, you think you're right, but you're wrong. I know why you think that, but you're wrong. But he actually knows why they think he's wrong, but he is actually right, and they're wrong. Look at the Jews and Jesus, right? They said, we know why you think you are the Son of God, but you're wrong. You are crazy. And we're going to mock you. We're going to give you a crown of thorns and a fucking cape. Because you think you know better than us. The fancy schmancy fucking Pharisees and priests and so on and so forth. But we know better than you, and we are going to mock you. Like I said, the most insightful people are doomed to imprisonment, mockery, torture, denial, and who are the main people going after them? People with complexes. Now, I've never said the Pharisees weren't smart. But they weren't Jesus. They weren't the most insightful people. What we see time and time again is the most insightful people get killed, or they are imprisoned, or they are labeled mentally ill. So it is impossible for society to admit as a whole, as a result of it being controlled, to admit that the most insightful people are the most insightful people. That doesn't happen. It is impossible to be among the most insightful people and to help them with what they're doing. And it is impossible to be one of the most insightful people and to not be labeled mentally ill. Thank you.